Hi, friends. Thank you for tuning in to the Concussion Coach podcast. I'm Bethany Lewis, the Concussion Coach. I'm a neurological occupational therapist and certified life coach, and I specialize in guiding people through their concussion recovery journey. I am passionate about helping people understand their injury, speed up their recovery, and reclaim control over their life post-concussion. The purpose of this podcast is to help increase awareness of concussions and the impact they can have on a person's life, and to bring hope to people who have suffered a concussion and those who love them. I firmly believe that sharing stories and knowledge about concussions will bring important light and understanding to this misunderstood and often invisible injury. The information in this podcast is meant to bring that awareness and hope and is not meant as medical advice. The opinions shared are those of the interviewees and my own. If you are suffering with lingering concussion symptoms, I have created a concussion coaching program specifically for you. I will be your mentor to guide you through your recovery journey, offering help with understanding and managing your symptoms, setting achievable goals, and learning how to manage your own thoughts and nervous system in order to get control over your life again. If this program sounds like something that would help you or someone you love, sign up for a free consultation. In the consultation, you'll get valuable information and resources and gain hope for your future. Sign up for your free consultation at the link in the show notes or at my website, www.theconcussioncoach.com. Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Concussion Coach podcast. I'm so excited for today's conversation. My guest is Rheaume. Rheaume is an award-winning artist, public speaker, disability advocate, and spokesperson who is an encouraging light in the journey of overcoming brain injury. She was recently named Westfield State University's 2022 Alumna of the Year and was the recipient of the MAHPERD, Massachusetts Association of Health, PE, Recreation, and Dance Distinguished Service Award. Allie has a bachelor's degree in movement science and a master's degree in health, physical education, and recreation. She's additionally certified in responsive classrooms, special populations, and RAP, Wellness Recovery Action Plan. Allie is the owner of her art business, Embracing Unique, the facilitator of a virtual Life After Concussion support group, and the host of Rise Up, a social hour for individuals navigating life with disability. She serves on the Brain Injury Council of Massachusetts, as well as the Franklin Disability Commission. She uses social media to help multiply hope, provide new perspectives, and apply her gift of teaching to educate and advocate. Allie is passionate about people and bringing the community together as a collaborative effort to support, advocate, and increase awareness of brain injury. So I connected with Allie through social media, and I love her content on Instagram, and I'm really excited to get to know her better through this conversation. So thank you for being here, Allie.
Oh, thank you for having me, Bethany. I'm really excited to talk together.
Yes, I think you have a lot of really good perspective to add to this, and I think it'll be a really helpful conversation for people to hear. So thanks for being here. So let's just start at the beginning. Tell us about your injury. How long ago was it? What happened? Give us the details.
Sure. So in February of 2016, I was accidentally struck on the face by a steel commercial door. I went to the ER. They told me, okay, you have a concussion, go home and rest, you'll be fine. I woke up a completely different person the next day. I had a stutter, I had blurry vision, dizziness, really bad pain in my head, couldn't even hold my own head up myself. So I was teaching at the time. I actually took the rest of the school year off from February to June just to get better because I needed a lot more space for recovery than I thought I would.
Yeah.
So through 2016, I did start to progress, but then unfortunately at the end of 2016, I sustained an additional concussion. And at the same time, I had a really severe medication reaction. So because of that combination, I ended up in the hospital at a 10% functioning level, unable to walk, talk, chew, or anything.
Holy cow. Oh my gosh. How long did that last?
Well, I was in neuro in the hospital for a week, and then I was inpatient at Spalding Rehab for a month. I was discharged after that. I only was home for 1 month. And then I ended up in the neuro ICU. My whole body shut down again. And we started to recognize various other medical conditions that were playing a role in the situation, such as hypoglycemia, dysautonomia, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So honestly, from that point forward, it's just been really like slow and steady rehab, regaining the walking, regaining the talking, and starting to regain life back again.
Yeah. Holy cow. Were those the month later, was there a specific trigger that instigated your need to go to the hospital again? Or was it just all those underlying things that were playing together to make function impossible?
That's a really good question. I mean, when I personally think about it, there's no doctor in the world that could ever even try to put all these pieces together. But I had two medication changes, both at the same time. And one of them was gabapentin, which is a medication that you're supposed to wean off of, not just completely come off of. So I did have some really severe nerve pain, and I think my nervous system reacted really strongly to coming off of that. But then I was actually also on the pill at the time, which really affects hormones, and concussion also affects hormones. So I think by suddenly also coming off of that, my body was just like, what are you doing?
Oh man. Okay, yeah, that makes sense to me that is how your body would respond. And those other underlying things that you were dealing with, had you had those long term, or were those also like post concussion that when they started?
We've actually come to realize that there are several medical conditions I was navigating before concussion, but didn't necessarily know it. Hypoglycemia, I did know, but that was something that I don't think it was very well managed. And I was sort of surface level with that. So it just got really bad after. And then something like Ehlers-Danlos syndrome is a genetic condition. So technically I was born with it. And when I look back on my life, there's definitely indicators that I was navigating that. However, sustaining the concussion with epigenetics, it just that inflammation, everything, it really brought it out, super obvious. So I was diagnosed post concussion with that. And then like something like dysautonomia, I look back on medical records, I definitely had some bits and pieces of that through my life as well. But again, post concussion, 100% dysautonomia diagnosed then. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Super, super interesting. With the Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, can you tell us, just for listeners, what that is, just really quickly?
Sure. So it's a genetic condition that affects the connective tissue of the body. Anything made of connective tissue, which your skin is, something like blood vessels are, your organs, a lot of things are made out of connective tissue, your tendons, ligaments. So anything made out of that tissue with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, it can be too lax, too stretchy. So blood vessels tend to expand too much, or joints can dislocate very easily. Some organs, like for swallowing, the epiglottis, maybe it doesn't close or open as efficiently. Vocal cords may not come together as well. So anything made of connective tissue can just be a little bit too stretchy.
Hey, and that can have all kinds of impacts, I'm sure, for daily functioning. So yeah.
It does. But also one thing that I feel like they could do a lot more research on is cervical instability, because every concussion involves the neck. And if somebody experiences Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, there's a high likelihood of cervical instability, again, due to that laxity. So there could be more of an impact on the neck and any injuries or subluxations with the neck. So for someone such as myself, I still to this day, over 7 years later, have still been working on my neck and strengthening it and getting adjustments, because those symptoms can very much overlap with concussion symptoms.
Yes. Oh, that is fascinating. Thank you for bringing that up. That is definitely not a connection I would have made, but really, really interesting. I agree. Anybody who's a researcher out there, study this, okay? That is super, super interesting. So it sounds like it's just been a really big journey. Like prior to dealing with this, did you have a lot of knowledge of concussions or the disability world? Like, was this part of your awareness before?
Yes and no. So I was a full-time elementary school PE teacher prior to concussion, and I was a high school field hockey and track coach, among many other jobs that I had. So I kind of laugh thinking like, I literally have a bachelor's degree in movement science. I have a master's degree in health and physical education. As a coach, you have to get certified in concussion education every single year that you're coaching for high school athletics. And so I feel like what I knew at the time is also what other people knew at the time, which was not much. I knew enough as a coach to, if my player hit their head and it looked like they could have a concussion, to pull them. And not all coaches do that, unfortunately, but I had that knowledge. I knew my anatomy. But like I said, research and everything has come so far, even from 2016 when all this happened, that I feel like I did know a lot for what was known about concussion back then.
Okay. But I imagine you've learned a lot more since then.
Oh, absolutely. Blows my mind what I've learned since then.
There's so much to learn. That's really cool. So, and I guess maybe this is a silly question, but how did your life change following your concussion and these events that happened? And also, how did you cope with those changes?
Yes.
That's a
So
big question.
drastically,
Sorry.
drastic changes. Like I said, I mean, I was a full-time elementary PE teacher, which is like balls flying at your head, 40 kids in the gym at the same time asking me like, Miss Rheaume, why are you wearing a purple shirt today? I'm like, I don't know. It was just what I chose. Miss, look at me, look at me. And having the ability to process everything they're telling me, talk to a kid while a ball is flying at me, just all that processing. And then to have that change so suddenly, I have not returned to teaching in a school where there are, 20 kids in a classroom or 40 kids in the gym or a whole grade out at recess. So that was a really big adjustment for me. As I said before, I had a lot of jobs. It wasn't just that. So I stopped doing all of them. And I think that's one of the biggest changes for me, was trying to figure out, how do I still embrace who I am and the gifts that I've been given, but doing it in a new way? Because I knew when I was laying in that hospital bed, I wasn't returning to a gymnasium full of children. And there's a lot of people that do go back to teaching. I should say this, go back to teaching in a school. Once you're a teacher, you're always a teacher. It's a gift. It's never gone. So I say I've simply changed settings. So the world is my classroom now. So yeah, that was a really, really big change for me. And then also being really independent and then suddenly having to count on anyone and everyone around me. I had to learn to become very vulnerable, which I was not before. Most of my relationships I had great friends and family, but everything was surface. I never really went deep with people. So that was also a really big, I would say, emotional change for me, like letting people into my life more. So coping with those things was definitely interesting as someone who, again, was very independent. Like, I can do this myself, no problem. I don't need you. And one of those changes for me was letting my guard down and being also okay with expressing emotion and being okay with crying in front of people and realizing that, you know what, this journey is going to be up and down, and it's okay to be human and to feel the emotions. I think that was a really important part for me in the coping piece of it.
Yeah. Oh, that's so important. And I love that you brought up that it's okay to feel the emotions that come up, and it's up and down. It is a journey. Yeah. You said so much that I think we could really dive into it, but having that significant, quick life change. I know a lot of times, I don't know, as you were talking about it, I was just thinking that lends easily towards a lot of like depression, anxiety kind of stuff. If you wouldn't mind sharing, was that something that you dealt with? And if so, how did you deal with it?
That's a great question, because that's very common after a concussion. I am very grateful that I personally did not. I wouldn't have considered myself diagnosed with anxiety or depression. I absolutely had moments of feeling really sad or worried or nervous. But for me, I feel like I've always been made as someone who can come out of something like that a little bit easier, which I don't take lightly. I do not take lightly. So while I've had moments of various emotions, I thankfully have not experienced anxiety and depression.
Oh, that is amazing. And I'm so glad for you. That's a huge blessing. How did you deal with those dark moments though? When it was really hard, were there things that you found particularly helpful to get through those?
Well, in addition to reminding myself it was okay to be real and actually express them, I would say the top two things were, one, surrounding myself with people who also supported that and allowed it, right? Mm-hmm. If someone was going to say, don't cry, but I really needed to cry, that wasn't the support necessary at the time. So really surrounding myself with people who were supporting me, as well as embracing a growth mindset. Because as we know, if you're not with other people who embrace a growth mindset, it can be a lot harder for you personally. And then the other thing being my faith. I mean, if it were not for what I believe and staying firm in that and having scripture and really counting on God, that's a huge piece of the journey for me as well.
Yes. Yes. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And I do feel like that lends so much, that can be key. And actually, I'm glad you brought up faith because I'm curious. I've talked to a number of people and have heard through other like ways that sometimes a feeling of connection with the divine can be impacted by a concussion. Again, if you're comfortable sharing with us, is that something that you experienced, or were you not? Did you not have to deal with that?
Oh, I actually think my faith and my relationship with Christ actually improved. Even while laying in a hospital bed, I definitely had moments of asking, like, of course, I want to know, like, what's going on? But I was able to flip it in the way of, what's the purpose in this? Like, hey, God, what's going on? What do you want me to do with this? Instead of like, why did you let this happen? Reframing it. And it really, really, I think, helped me grow closer to Christ and embrace that even more in my life rather than run away from it.
That's beautiful. And I think actually the people that I've talked to, I think would say that it through roundabout ways maybe, or that it did and have that effect as well. But there was that piece for them, like, and have you read The Ghost in My Brain?
Yes.
Okay. He talks about it as well. Like there's, there may be a part in the brain that allows us to feel that connection more, kind of like our ears allow us to access the sound that's out there. There may be a part in our brain that helps us to access and feel it, even though if that's gone, just kind of like with our hearing, if the hearing goes, the world is still filled with sound. If we lose that feeling and connection that we can feel in the way that we're used to feeling it, it doesn't mean that God's not there, but anyway, I just thought that was a really interesting piece. So, but yes, I think this kind of experience can definitely increase that connection, especially the more we're relying on Christ, on the divine, then we develop that relationship. So
we do. And you know what, Bethany, I'd like to add to that is I feel like in those situations, whether research wise with the actual brain or not, I think what helps is the reality is we're a little bit removed from the commonality of the world and the demand of the world after concussion, right? Like we need a little bit of extra space and rest and quiet time. And what do you do with that quiet time, right? And when you're working full time and running from one thing to another, you're constantly overstimulated, distracted. Your brain is always busy with logistical stuff. But after sustaining a concussion, and then all of a sudden life is a little bit more quiet, I feel like less distractors I'll speak for myself, has allowed me to really embrace that as a time to draw closer to God again.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And again, a piece that I wouldn't have connected, but that makes a lot of sense. That's really cool. I did see that as an opportunity to grow that relationship instead of focusing on what you're missing out on that you're used to doing. So I love that reframing. So how did this injury impact the people that were closest to you?
The infamous topic, as many people say, my friend group changed a little bit. Some people stuck around, some friendships faded away. I'm very grateful that my family, 100%, every single family member has stuck by my side. I know not everyone can say that, and I'm outrageously grateful for that. I feel like, as I said before, any of my relationships that either stuck around or new people that came into my life as some new blessings from this, I've definitely grown deeper with them. My relationships are way better than they've ever been in my entire life because I'm actually honest with people now. I'm willing to share stuff with them. So yes, there are a bunch of people who I haven't seen since concussion, or maybe I saw them right after, but I haven't seen them again recently, anything like that. And instead of focusing on those fading away, I've tried to focus on the ones that are here, but also remembering that relationships are built off of relatability. So if I'm not working in a school, how am I going to expect those people to still relate to me, right? Or some other setting. And I think the other challenge, though, with relationships was with my family, was having some sort of boundary, dividing line, transition from, yes, I need caregivers, and yes, I need help, but I also need my mom and my dad and my brothers and my sister, right? So trying to find that balance or rhythm or whatever you want to call it, where I can still get help with things, but not let that overtake and be what my relationships are about. Like, they're not there for tasks. They're there as humans too, who also want to be loved. So that's been interesting to navigate.
Yeah. Any tips for people on that? Anything that you've learned through this process?
Sure. I think one thing is, as often as possible, reminding people that you appreciate them. So for example, my mom goes grocery shopping for me every Monday and comes over and we hang out for about half an hour or so after she drops off the groceries, and it's our time to catch up together. Before, if I would have just take advantage of that and just let her drop off my groceries, maybe even not hang out with her, it can almost become automatic and assumed and taken for granted. But what I try really hard to do every time she comes over, thank you so much. I love you. I really appreciate this. And again, to not take that for granted, but then also remembering people do love to help, right? So finding when to ask, or here's the other thing. This was really important for me, is also asking people who are caregivers to do fun things and not only do task related things. So I don't want my dad to think every time I text him or call him, it's only going to be for a task, right? This past summer, I went to the ocean for the first time since concussion, and because it's something my dad really wanted to do. So I was like, you know what? Let's jump in the car one day. I'm in Franklin, Massachusetts. We went down to Newport, Rhode Island, and just made it a fun day. And he still needed to take care of me. He was still my caregiver while we were together, but we made it fun. So I think that's important too.
Oh, I love that. And yeah, I think that's a really good reminder and a beautiful thing. Like it's important to remember the relationships as well as the tasks that are happening, and the gratitude piece is so important. I love that. Thank you for bringing those up. Yeah. So let's talk for a second about the treatments and therapies and the things that you tried. I saw that you posted recently some of the top providers or like types of therapy that was helpful for you. That was really cool to hear. But yeah, I'd love to hear, it sounds like in your journey, you've done a lot. So what have you tried? What has been helpful for you? What would you like to share with people?
The therapies or treatments that I have found the most beneficial have been the three typical rehab therapies of physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech language pathology. And also noting, in case you've never heard speech language pathology before, they don't just work on speech, they also work on swallow, and they also work on cognition. So that's been really important for me, as well as functional medicine, trying to get to the root cause of things that were going on, not just as we know from the story I told you, that I agree with all of us collaborating with each other all the time, but people have different approaches. So I was not doing well with the system that I was in, the medical system I was in, with just being offered medications. So I tried some functional medicine, which was again more root cause, helped me reduce inflammation, actually be able to come off of any prescriptions I was on, which was really cool. And then chiropractic care. Those are all my top-notch treatments.
That's awesome. And I'm curious, I know there's so many different types of chiropractic out there. Was there a specific kind or ones that you found particularly helpful?
The couple of chiropractors that I have been so blessed to work with have both been certified in applied kinesiology. So they could do actual, physical adjustments. People think about like the cracking, right? Or you can go in and very gentle, like soft tissue or gentle manipulation, sometimes even emotional work, checking in on, is the body holding on to any emotional storage causing some pain, and even things like allergies. So yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, super, super interesting. That's awesome. And I love that you were able to find people to help you in those. And I'm curious, I'm assuming, or I'm guessing that the PTOT speech therapies that you went to had a concussion specific tilt, like they knew what they were doing for concussion specifically. Is that a good assumption or not necessarily?
I'll say yes and no, only because my experience is so unique with all the other medical conditions. There's been times I've done the therapies for other reasons. But if we're obviously talking about concussion here. So when it came to symptoms that were more concussion based. I would say physical therapy was certainly the therapy to really hone in on concussion specialists, vestibular rehab, and to work with someone that says, yes, I've done extra training. I have a lot of experience with concussion. With speech language pathology, that was important to me as well, that somebody understood concussion. At first, it was just sort of general speech language pathology, but then I progressed to working with someone who was way more in the specific brain injury world, more so. And actually now she's a cognitive health coach. And I still am connected with her and work with her and everything. I mean, she's also my friend. So, and then with OT, that I didn't do as much. So I don't even remember if they were concussion specific, but the other two definitely.
Okay, cool. Very, very interesting. Yeah, I think I'm an OT, so I feel very passionate about all of the therapies. I love this stuff. And that's really cool that those were so functional medicine, PT, OT, speech, and the chiropractic care were most beneficial for you.
Yeah. And shout out to you with OT, because especially at home, OT is what helped me live life again, especially at home. Like I wasn't able to use my, washer and dryer at first because I was so confused about the dial and where to turn it. And there seemed to be so many steps, and OT is who helped me put a little piece of tape here and let's practice reaching in and, all the strategies. So shout out to OTs.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, it is very functional, very life oriented. And I love it because we overlap with both PT and speech. So we can work on the cognitive piece. We can work on some of the physical stuff as well. And I found this, I love my niche with concussion specific OT stuff. I just think it's so important. All of it is so important. And I learned so much from all of the different therapies. So it's a good thing. So thank you for sharing that. So what things have been most helpful in discovering and loving yourself post-concussion? Because you mentioned everything was different all of a sudden, just like that. And I imagine there was a process of discovery and love. So I'd love to hear that.
Yes. And I use the word discovery all the time. I actually prefer to say it's a journey of discovery versus recovery all the time.
That's awesome.
Right. Physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, everything. I would say giving myself grace and also giving the people around me grace. Prior to sustaining concussion, definitely would have been considered someone who liked to overachieve or preferred things to be perfect and done the right way the first time. And so sustaining concussion, it took me some practice. And part of loving myself has been releasing control, releasing perfection, releasing people pleasing, and giving grace instead, being totally human, being okay with making mistakes, reminding myself that mistakes are all lessons, and I'm a teacher, so how can I not embrace that? And allowing that process to happen.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love everything you just said. Those are things that I feel so strongly about. And I talk to people about all the time, especially in the coaching. I think that it's a beautiful example that it was so helpful in this case and that it can be helpful in such an extreme case. But I think those principles across the board, this is what everybody needs to be working on. We all need to give ourselves grace. We need to release control and the perfection, the people pleasing. All of those things hold us back so much. And I think I don't know if it's just naturally ingrained in us or socially implemented into us or something, but those are things that so many people struggle with. And I think, just across the board, this is important, important information. But I love that those were the things that were so helpful for you in this journey of discovery. So thank you for sharing those.
Oh, you're welcome.
Those things. That's awesome. And was there anything that helped you to come to that or helped you along the process of allowing yourself to release control and all of those things?
Practice. It really took practice. And I'll say this I don't know how many times I'll say this today. I'll probably come up 5 more times, but surrounding myself with people who allow it, right? Because if I'm trying to release control, forgiveness is a huge part of that, right? Forgiving maybe some doctors that I felt made some choices that weren't beneficial for me, or or forgiving situations. So forgiving, letting go, all of it, it takes practice. It takes time. I mean, it's not something that, at least from my experience, you just wake up and you're good. No more people pleasing, no more trying to control. That's not the reality. The reality for me was one step at a time. And again, that vulnerability piece as well.
Yes, so true. And I think, I was going to ask you, and I think maybe the vulnerability piece is part of the answer to this, but with one of the things that I hear a lot, or that I see people struggling with, is I think it's very much along the lines of people pleasing, where they want to push themselves past what is good for them physically, emotionally, or whatever, so that they don't hurt somebody else's feelings, or they don't want to be rude, or that, and I try to tell people, you're not responsible for how other people respond to your injury. Not to say that we don't care what people are feeling or thinking, but there needs to be some boundaries to protect you as well. And I imagine that's a hard thing to find, and that a balance to strike there. But do you have any advice for people who, or experience that you may have had with needing to set boundaries to protect your recovery and managing the people aspect of that with other people?
Yes, 100%. It's a topic I'm very passionate about now, setting boundaries and communicating with people. And I feel like one of the hardest parts for that, again, I'll speak from my own experience, was realizing, again, giving grace to people, that if you're going to change, other people are going to probably be shocked, and they may have a hard time adjusting to the change. Like my family, at the time I was 28 when I sustained the concussion, they knew me for 28 years. If I had friends from grade school, they knew me for 20 years, right? So when people know you that long, and then all of a sudden you're like, boundary, communication. This is what I need for myself. Instead of being like, wait a minute, where's the people pleaser? Like, where's the girl that just said yes to everything? What happened to her? People are shocked. And a lot of times, if somebody has expressed some challenges in response to your boundary setting, they were probably taking advantage of how giving you were all the time. So something I learned, and you already said this too, Bethany, is how we're not responsible for other people's reactions. We can also help by being very clear in our communication and still showing appreciation, right? So instead of just saying really firm in the middle of an argument, don't do this anymore. I don't want this. I don't want that. Very calmly at a time where there's not an argument going on, saying, hey, you know what? I've come to realize that something that could be really beneficial for me, using an I statement, not about them, make it about you. Something that could be really beneficial for me is if when I come over, we could have one room that's designated to be really quiet. Thank you so much for considering, right? So it's thanking them, it's appreciating them, and being really clear on the boundaries too, really, and also sticking with them. Because if you say you need something, but then they see you doing something else, they're going to get confused. And so the consistency is important too.
Yes, that's beautiful. I love that example. Thank you for giving us a very concrete example for that, and ways to phrase it too. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And I hope that's helpful for people, because it is I see it all the time. It seems to be a very common concern. So I think that is really, really helpful. Thank you. And I guess kind of on the same lines, but opposite here, what did other people say or do that was particularly helpful for you? What advice do you have for people who are interested in helping someone who's sustained a concussion?
One thing that stands out for me is when anyone ever says to me, I'm so happy to help. Say I need a ride because I have not returned to driving yet. When the person says, I would be more than happy to help you, and when we go together, wherever they're going, I'll also be happy to leave when you need to leave. Just that simple statement of I'm happy to do it for you. Oh my goodness, especially talking about the people pleasing part, right? Because what used to get me into trouble was okay, I do want to do this. I want to ask for the help, but then I'm trying to pretend symptoms don't exist because I wanted to not be a burden to the other person. But so when the other person is willingly saying, I'm happy to help, please tell me what you need, reiterating that for me has helped with part of that, like letting go of, oh, I'm not just trying to please you. Like, okay, I can have needs. So that I've really appreciated. And then also when people recognize and celebrate wins with me, even if I don't recognize them at the time. For example, I remember a family gathering. It must have been a year ago now at this point. I was at my sister's house and I ended up being there for maybe half an hour longer than I ever had since sustaining concussion. And by the time I left, both my sister and my mom were like, do you realize you were here like 30 minutes longer? Oh my goodness, that was amazing. And just pointing it out, but without the expectation of like, you better do that every time.
Right.
Just honoring it.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I think it says a lot too, that they noticed like how long you were able to be there. Like they care about you. They love you. They were excited for you. And I'm glad that you brought that point up too, because I think that is something that I've heard a lot of people say is when the person can't always see the progress that is being made. And so it can be very helpful for an outsider to point it out and celebrate that with them. I love that. And the point that you brought up before, I think is a really important one as well. And I guess it also plays into that people pleasing that we were talking about earlier, but not wanting to be a burden. Like that phrase specifically, I've heard that a lot of times. And I did some coaching with somebody on this recently, and I'm curious if you have any advice. I think there's a part, there's like a coaching part of me that's like, well, in one hand, like what's wrong with being a burden? We're all a burden to some degree on everybody, right? Like that's it. It's part of being a human, like if you want to call it that, being a burden. But on the other hand, like we're not a burden. Like we're all like here to help each other and support each other, and we go through seasons. Like there's a lot that we can say about it. But what was helpful for you in believing other people when they said that they wanted to help you, that they were happy to help you? And because they can say it all day long, but if you don't believe it, then it doesn't have the impact on you that you would like it to have. So what allowed you to accept that and to believe that you were not a burden?
Oh, this one, if you could like put a summary of like more of that emotional piece of the journey in, for me, it's overcoming feeling like a burden. It 100% has been the most consistent theme for me, because I've never been the person to want to put somebody out of their place, right? And I think one thing that has helped me is scripture says we are called to carry each other's burdens, but we as people, we are not burdens. Burdens happen, burdens occur, burdens are tasks, situations. Those things exist for anyone in the world, but we can help each other carry them. So as a person, you are not a burden. I'm still working on believing that, trust me. But one of the things that has additionally helped me is crying and literally sitting down with someone and just letting it go and saying, I didn't even want to ask you for this because I didn't want to put you out of your way. And literally, honestly, completely vulnerably saying to the person, I needed help with something and I just didn't even want to ask because I didn't want that burden put on you, or I felt like a burden, and trying again to remind myself, I'm not a burden. There's just tasks that need to be done and I need help.
I love that so much. I got chills when you said that. Like, we are not burdens. We're here to carry each other's burdens. I love that. Thank you so much for that perspective, and for the being real about that. It's still a thing, right? We're still working on it, and it's something to continue working on believing. And because I think that is, again, I think it's especially people who are dealing with concussions, I think it's like there's a light shine on it, but for everybody to some degree, it's very common for people to have a hard time asking for help. And so this is an important topic, and I love that perspective. Thank you very much for sharing that. And actually, I guess this would also be kind of, I guess this may be a repeat of the question, but if there's anything more you want to add to it, what advice would you give to people who are loving and supporting people with concussions? Sounds like letting them know when you are able to help and that you're happy to do so, and being there, and helping them see their wins and celebrate them. Is there anything, any other advice you have for caregivers and loved ones?
Take care of yourself. Please take care of yourself. You can't pour from an empty cup. And if you've had a really stressful day, it will show, right? Or if you're going through something, it'll show. And it's really hard to give to somebody else when you're feeling like you need help too. So I highly encourage, this is sustaining a concussion as an individual, right? That's not just impactful for you. It's impactful for anyone around you and any of the relationships you've had. And it's going to take work for anyone. So family members, caregivers, friends, anyone in that category, the loved ones category, take time for yourself. If you need a break from doing some of the caregiving, maybe help find an additional support. So you're not just leaving the person empty-handed, but you are taking time for yourself. Talk therapy, right? Maybe I'm sure there's probably pieces of the person you're helping that maybe you're missing. Mm. And it can be really helpful to talk through that with somebody you trust and having your own self-care as well.
So important and so beautiful. And I think I would love to hear more about the support group that you run and things like that. Like, are there support groups can be helpful, I imagine, for both the person with a concussion and the people loving and supporting them. What do you have to say about support groups in general and yours specifically?
Oh, I'm all for it. When the person's ready, 100%. I definitely encourage never pushing somebody into a support group because you do need to be ready for it. It can be emotional, but they're amazing. Absolutely amazing. Best thing that I've ever done, starting to get involved in one. And now it's really cool to be at the point to be able to facilitate them. Instead, I feel like I'm at a point in my own journey where I've had enough healing that I can help guide people without the hurt behind it, right? That's really important as a facilitator. So I've participated in many support groups through the Brain Injury Association of Massachusetts. And that's what's helped me move from identity really feeling like it's in the brain injury survivor piece to now like moving more towards that professional piece and being able to help people, roles, I should say, not piece. But the virtual support group that I started, which is a year old now at this point, is called Life After Concussion. We meet the second Wednesday of every month at 2 p.m. Eastern time. An hour and a half. And the goal is for it to be a safe and supportive space for people who have sustained concussion or even other brain injuries, honestly, as long as you're able to participate, to feel heard, validated, respected, be able to relate, get tips and tricks. And then I also run a social hour meetup in my town for individuals who navigate life with disability. So a more broad population than just concussion. And that there is where I have seen more caregivers, because someone like the Brain Injury Association of Massachusetts, they have support groups that are either both survivors and caregivers or just survivors. Yeah. The virtual group that I facilitate tends to be all individuals who have sustained concussion versus like their loved ones. But this in-person group that I've been running, caregivers are often with the individuals, and they've had some really vulnerable conversations, even in front of all of us together, saying, you know what, as a caregiver, like I didn't realize how much support I needed. And to sit here and talk to other caregivers who feel like I feel is so empowering. And I don't feel like I'm alone anymore. And to me, that's across the board for any group. So I highly, highly recommend them.
Oh, I love that so much. Again, getting chills as you're talking about that. That's a really, really beautiful thing. How can people find a support group, do you think? I assume just looking online is probably a good way to go, but I know there are brain injury associations or groups for every state, right? And they usually provide those as well.
For the most part, correct. I mean, so I don't know if every state does, but there's the Brain Injury Association of America. They do like webinars and stuff, but as far as support groups, it is by the state. I know even in other countries, for those listening from other places, there's lots of organizations that also have their own groups. There's actually in the States, again, in Massachusetts, Concussion Legacy Foundation. In the UK, there's Same You. So there's all these, or in Canada, there's various organizations. So yeah, searching for your local organizations, searching brain injury support groups, the social media, following hashtags for concussion will very much lead you to, especially the virtual ones that you can join. I know even in Massachusetts, you can join from anywhere. You don't have to be from Massachusetts. We welcome anyone. Yeah. But then even some doctors' offices sometimes have listings as well. So it wouldn't hurt to ask maybe a neurologist if they know of any too.
Oh, excellent. I love all those ideas. That's great. Thank you. And yeah, the social media hashtag following is also a good one I wouldn't have thought of. So that's a great idea. And do you have people for your virtual one, do you have people from all over coming to it?
I do, yes. Depending on the time frame of whenever something's happening, whether it's the actual support group or a presentation, a webinar, people come from all over.
That's so cool. I love it. I love the community you're creating here. That's a beautiful thing. So if you could go back in time, what advice would you give to yourself in the early days of your injury?
Don't rush. Don't rush it. My goal was to get back to everything I was doing and to get back as soon as possible. And if I were to have gone back and done it differently, I would have automatically taken at least 1 week of work off, maybe even 2, just right off the bat. Oh, I sustained a concussion. I'm out for 2 weeks. I need to take care of myself. But instead I was taking it day by day, which is cool too. Like taking it day by day is important. But I think allowing yourself the space to really take it one step at a time and recognize your needs, it helps you realize what's going on now and what do you need to move forward to feel better versus like, what do you want to get back to? Because that just forced me to be a less available version of myself than if I had taken the time to myself more.
That's a good point. I think, yeah, not looking back as much, but looking in and now and forward. That's good. And I imagine this is probably similar advice, but if there's anything else that you would add for advice to others who are dealing with similar injuries.
Remember that it's a unique journey when you feel ready to. And honestly, you may not always feel ready for this. Sometimes if it's fear standing in the way, you got to tackle it, right? But as you're ready, start to branch out. Please don't go by the old advice of sit in a dark room, shut everything down. Because what happens, here's the thing. I'm also a huge advocate of absolutely whatever tools you need to support yourself, 100%. Go with the tools. But embrace also the mindset of moving forward and eventually weaning off of them. Because if you continuously live a life that is totally quiet, shades are drawn, sunglasses are on, earplugs are in, every day in your house, or when you go out, actually I say in your house, then when you go out into public, the world is a very different place. And it's going to seem a lot more drastic going from napping 5 hours a day to going out to a doctor's appointment. That's a drastic change for your body from rest to demand. But if you can find a middle ground and start to embrace restorative activities instead, keep yourself going, keep yourself awake, but the things that are proper for you at the time, wherever you are in your journey, and then continue to branch out, keep challenging yourself. Don't become complacent and don't settle where you are. Keep challenging it step by step. And that'll eventually help you progress and come over the overstimulation of it all.
Yes. Okay. Amen to everything you just said. I love that. That is so important and such an important message for people to hear. And as you were saying that too, though, I was like, oh, this is another one of those things. It's like the concussion shines a light on it. And I think it kind of narrows it down and slows down the process a lot more. But this is also like a growth journey for everybody always. Like, don't get complacent, like keep pushing yourself, like find new things and discover more about yourself. Again, that discovering yourself journey, like it's very applicable to everyone. So I think that's a really cool point and very important, especially for people who are at the beginning stages of concussion or not beginning, just like
anyway,
learning and pushing yourself and to the degree that you're able safely, right? Like it's a balance. It's always working on figuring out, but that journey is so individualized too. And that's really important. So how are you doing today? What are you still dealing with and what keeps you going?
Yeah, it can be hard sometimes to decipher between like things that have lingered since concussion and then the other medical conditions we talked about. I think for me, now I definitely know the pieces that I'm still working on improving are the vestibular system. So spatial awareness, balance, proprioception, all of that. I am currently working on walking on uneven surfaces. So that is my current goal, and vision is in there as well, that, the systems all work together, but definitely vision as well. Eye tracking. I can read, I can paint and everything, but sometimes tracking to the right can still be challenging for me. So I want to get that back. Also want to get my reaction time back and faster. Like my body's physical reaction to things. I feel like I'm pretty good processing wise. I've even been in a few emergent situations helping other people since concussion. I actually am like, okay, I can do this. I can process. But like physically, my body doesn't always react fast enough. So those are some things that I'm working on, as well as still gaining back energy and navigating the fatigue. Although I was also diagnosed with narcolepsy, with cataplexy after concussion. That's something that occurred for me. So again, deciphering between all of that. But those are a few things that I'm working on.
Okay. Thank you for sharing those. And what keeps you going through all of this?
What keeps me going? I'm going to go on my faith again, for sure. And also going to go with surrounding yourself with great people again. And here's one thing that I do. It keeps me going. I have a win jar. Every single week, I write down a win and I put it in the jar, and I have an alarm set for every Saturday morning to do it. So I remember, and I'm looking at my jar right now, only a few more weeks left of the year. At the end of the year, I get to dump it out and read them all. And I did that last year, and it was the coolest thing. And I started my next year so eager to tackle more, because I was like, oh, remember all the things that I've already done? How cool is that? Like, what else can I do? So celebrating those wins and reflecting on how far I've come.
Oh my gosh. I love that so much. It's such a good idea. And that's beautiful. I love that. And can I propose one as well that I think you haven't said, but I think in observing you and what you're doing, I'm guessing it helps keep you going, is all the good that you're doing, like with what you've been given, like helping so many people. I imagine that's rewarding.
Absolutely. That's actually a really good point, because whether it's volunteering or working or anything, basically having something that you're achieving and having people that you're helping are two huge things versus being isolated and alone.
Yeah, it seems like more of like an outward focus, whether it's to other people or what you can accomplish, rather than focusing in on what's wrong and how things aren't going well. So, and again, it's okay if sometimes you need to do that, the internal thing. That's understandable too. But I think the keeping you going is the part that's more outward facing. So yeah, beautiful. I think you've probably described a lot of these, but are there any other lessons that you've learned through this journey and this experience that you've been on that you'd like to share?
Sure. So I'd say one is we can never assume we know what anyone's going through, especially when you just look at someone. As we know, concussion's an invisible injury. And I've learned a lot about the disability community at large, lots of other medical conditions people navigate. Everyone's so kind. Everyone's wonderful. You just never know what's going on. You don't know why someone's parking in handicap if you don't see a mobility device. You don't know why someone is not quickly responding to you if they're taking a little bit longer at an appointment check-in. So never judging that you think you know what someone's going through. But then also my other lesson is that peace and joy in your life are far more important than any amount of money or tasks. You could do all the jobs in the world. You could accomplish all the things in the world. But if you don't have peace and joy, it's not the same. Much more important. So
true. Oh, that's beautiful. Yes. Having that perspective, that focus is key. That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think we've covered a lot of these other questions that I have here. I would love to hear more about the public speaking, the disability advocacy, and your art. If you want to tell us anything about all of those, I'd be very interested in hearing.
Sure. So I also was a public speaker prior to concussion. So that's something that I have continued to do. I got back to it virtually first, and now I also do it in person. So I go to conferences or whatever's offered, both virtually and in person. I love it. It's my favorite thing to do by far. And the teacher in me loves also organizing it and like coming up with the presentations and all that. So that's my jam. I love it.
Is there a specific like theme that your public speaking is usually about? Like,
it depends on where I'm invited. So I do a lot for the brain injury community. I do a lot, which as an OT, I'm sure you would love this. I do a lot of those like tips and tricks and strategies. So I actually just did a webinar yesterday for brain injury survivors navigating the holidays, or I do a presentation with one of my friends who's a speech language pathologist called Effective Communication Between Providers and Patients. And so talking about the strategies for navigating, especially the brain injury community. But then as a teacher, I also present at teacher conferences and bring in the wisdom and the personal experience of, hey, I'm a teacher. I've been a teacher in a school. Let me share with you some things that I've learned about what your kids, what your students may be going through that you're not thinking twice about. Like they may be overstimulated or having trouble with attention or processing. And again, bringing my personal experience, they're like blown away when I talk about it. Like I would be a different teacher in a school now at going through what I've been through. So those are a couple, the two probably biggest themes or places, if you will, that I tend to do public speaking.
Very cool. Very, very cool. So keep going about the disability advocacy and your art.
Yeah. So disability advocacy, I serve on my town's disability commission, which is awesome to be able to advocate for things in my town, such as one of our train stations. You are not able to access it if you're in a wheelchair. They don't have a ramp yet. They don't have a way to get on yet. So we've been advocating for that, and we have an answer, and they're working on it, which is so exciting. Or when there needs to be more handicap parking at our farmers market or things like that, like little things where, and I love saying this to the community at large listening, because it's actually encouraged some other people. Remember this, your town may or may not, but most likely probably has a disability commission. So if you're running into challenges and they're frustrating for you, don't just hold on to them, speak them and try to find a way to better them for everyone, because you're probably not the only one experiencing it, is what I've learned from this. So I serve on that commission. I host that social hour group. And I also do some advocacy work as a spokesperson. So I'll share a company will hire me. I'll share my story, and they'll do video and photos and stuff for their company, but they also have my story behind it with that advocacy piece.
Oh, I love that. That's really, really cool. And how about your art? Tell me about this. Was art something that you were interested in prior to going through all of this?
I've always been a creative person, very creative, but I applied it in different ways. So I was never an artist, never sat down and painted before, but I would make posters for the gym in school, or coming up with lesson plans was my creativity, right? And then when I was at inpatient rehab, I was handed watercolor pencils, and then the journey of art just took off from there. My aunt is an artist, and she's my art mentor. She got me some watercolor paints and some acrylic paints and was like, here you go, like play around. And now I have my own art business. It's been running for a year, and I get consistent art commissions every single month. That's my main income. And I'm an artist. Like, what on earth? PE teacher to artist.
Love it. I love it. That's so cool. You're like living the dream. That's really awesome.
I love it.
Yeah, that's so cool. I'm curious if you noticed any increase in your capacity as an artist after the concussion, or I don't know. I have a friend that I was talking to earlier who had felt like after his concussion, his art just became much better. Like he had a lot more ideas and more ability. Is that something that you experienced at all?
Well, it's harder for me to say personally because I was not an artist prior to concussion.
Oh, sorry. You said it was after. Sorry.
No,
Okay.
that's okay. But the cool thing though is, what was I going to say about that? I would have never have even tried painting or become an artist before, because my life was so physically active. All of my jobs and roles were like, go, go, go all the time. So sustaining concussion led me to quiet time and sitting down and seeking activity in that way. And that's what led me to painting. And yeah, the discovery piece of that has been just amazing.
That is so cool, especially now that that's like your main source of income. That's so cool.
It blows my mind constantly, Bethany. I don't understand. When I finish a piece of art, I don't understand that I made it. I don't believe it. I don't know. People pay me for it.
So awesome. I love that. It's so cool when I talk to people who have gone through this kind of experience in this journey, like the things that are on the other side. They talk about post-traumatic growth, right? Like it's a really beautiful thing to see and so amazing what good can come of such hard things.
It's true. And it takes a lot. It takes a lot of ups and downs. It's very emotional. There's trial and error. I tried like 20 free art classes from my library, craft classes, just to see what I like to do. So it takes putting yourself out there to discover those new things, try them, being willing to fail. Or I heard once on a podcast that someone said the first time you do something will be the worst you ever are at it. So reminding yourself that like you can't expect to start something new and be the best at it. Like that's not reality. So just trying all the things.
Yes. Thank you for that perspective. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for everything you shared here. There's so much wisdom, and I really, really do appreciate your story and all that you've created from what you've been given. Like it's really cool to see. How can people find you, or if they want to hear more about you, or connect with you or learn what you're doing?
I'm everywhere. Just search my name. No, I'm just kidding. I literally Google my name. I'm everywhere. I'm on Instagram at Allison.Rheaume, which will that be spelled out in show notes or something?
Yes, but go ahead and spell it just for fun here.
Okay, so ALISON RHEAUME. That's my main account. And then my art account is at Embracing Unique. And then I am on TikTok if you want to find me there. I am on Facebook at Allie Rheaume. I have an email. I have a website. I have it all. I'm everywhere.
Perfect. Awesome. And yes, we will link it all in the show notes so people can definitely look there to find you. So awesome. Thank you so much for your time today. This was wonderful, and keep doing what you're doing. I love the light that you're putting into the world.
Oh, thank you so much, Bethany. This has been a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad you listened in today. I hope you have gained some helpful insights and inspiration regarding dealing with and recovering from concussions. My goal is to create more awareness and education about concussions and the fact that there is so much that can be done to improve life after someone has had one. Help me spread the message by liking, commenting, rating, and subscribing to this podcast, and share it with others who would benefit from hearing it. There are more resources available on my website. And again, if you or someone you love would benefit from concussion coaching, sign up for a free consultation using the link in the show notes or at my website, www.theconcussioncoach.com. Thank you. See you next time, and take good care of that amazing brain of yours.